What's up, YouTube? Welcome to the Bible Wisdom YouTube channel. I wanted to circle back and do a video on artificial intelligence. As you already know from the title, I think two scriptures that we can look at are Genesis chapter 11 and the Tower of Babel, and Revelation chapter 13. Now, if I really probably, took more time to maybe do some of these videos on a subject like this, maybe I could possibly find more things that the Bible has to say about this topic. But I will just be sharing a little bit of what I think, and also trying to get a biblical perspective on some of these things. So in general, I don't believe God is against technology or, the advancement of society. That's just the vibe that I get. Obviously, there are a ton that we don't know about God, but at the same time, it is hard for us to say that, when Chat GTP came out, God was 100% against it. But at the same time, I think there are some key insights in the scriptures that give us some direction for how people are to create things that, different technologies and different advancements in society. I think, definitely there are some guidelines that we should be following. Now, one thing I think we all kind of know is that it seems to be, not, of course, knowing exactly everyone's personal thoughts and different things like that, but it seems to me to be some of these people who are kind of the head honchos of technology, and the different inventors and scientists that are involved in a lot of these new techs don't necessarily believe in God or believe in the Bible. And I think that's something to really kind of hone in on, is that I think there are, I've heard of different inventors who are actually Christian, of course. And I just wanted to note that, in general, especially looking at maybe the public school system, collectively, we don't necessarily acknowledge God. And I think, of course, most, governments, kind of leave it up to the individual person to decide whether they, believe in God or, which religion they want to follow and different things like that. But, let's take a look at Genesis, and we can read on the Tower of Babel. I think can give us a little bit of insight. And then I've heard some good teachings on the Tower of Babel. And before we read it, I can just say some comments on how I think when we read about the Tower of Babel, it wasn't specifically like God was against society building tall buildings or something like that, and that kind of easier way to look at it, or it wasn't necessarily God was against people working together to accomplish a certain goal. But from different things that I've heard on commentary on the Tower of Babel, that I sort of get the vibe from when I read it as well, is that people were trying to basically going back to that original Garden of Eden temptation of trying to be like God. And one of the ways that they were doing that was building a tower to heaven. And it seems to imply that, one of the things that was in their hearts was trying to be like God in not necessarily trying to be like God from the standpoint of, oh, I want to be righteous like God or holy like God. It was from a sinful, stance. And so I think that has some correlations to different technologies and, different mindsets that we as people can have in these last days. And so let's read Genesis chapter 11. And this is after the flood of Noah. And so, which could also be an indication of, God wasn't just going to immediately destroy the world when he just got done, flooding the world and saving Noah and his family. So God wasn't necessarily going to destroy the world again, right after that happened. And so it seems like he shifted to deal with this reoccurring sin problem in a different way. And so chapter 11, Genesis chapter 11, verse 1, it says, "At one time, all the people of the world spoke the same language and used the same words. As the people migrated to the east, they found a plain in the land of Babylon or Babylonia and settled there. They began saying to each other, 'Let's make bricks and harden them with fire.' In this region, bricks were used instead of stone, and tar was used for mortar. Then they said, 'Come, let's build a great city for ourselves with a tower that reaches into the sky. This will make us famous and keep us from being scattered all over the world.'" So I think that's kind of one of the other things is that, God wanted people to spread out, all across the face of the earth and not just, kind of hunker down and everyone, lives in just this one part of the world, for as long, for all of history or, for a long period of time. So that was clearly one of the indications in scripture. So let's continue reading. Verse 5, chapter 11, Genesis. "But the Lord came down to look at the city and the tower the people were building. 'Look,' he said, 'the people are united, and they all speak the same language. After this, nothing they set out to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down and confuse the people with different languages. Then they won't be able to understand each other.' In that way, the Lord scattered them all over the world, and they stopped building the city. That is why the city was called Babel, because that is where the Lord confused the people with different languages. In this way, he scattered them all over the world." So, one of the connections I think this story has, I think there's a lot of things to say about this, a lot of interesting facts too. This is where, we have the origination of where all the different languages came from in the world, instead of maybe some sort of scientific answer that they won't tell you in public school or anything like that. And so that's an interesting note. But connecting this to artificial intelligence, it's interesting that, God, the Lord, it says, noticed what people were doing. And so I think it's definitely, safe to say that when people collectively start to make certain advances, God definitely notices. Now, obviously, there are details in the Bible that says that God notices, all the hairs of our head, or he even notices when a bird dies in the forest or something like that. He notices just the smaller things, details that as people we don't necessarily notice all the time. And so but anyway, this story I think reflects about how when people start to act united together, which I don't think God is necessarily against unity in certain degrees, because even within the Christian realm, God does want us to be unified as far as following Jesus. But what I think stands out in this, is that, the people were not moving, they weren't scattering. And then also, he said he wanted to confuse the people so that they won't be able to understand each other, and basically stop them from building this city and just having everyone be in one little area, which I think is a deterrence on sin. Just imagine if everybody, all the different levels of people, all the different types of people that are out there, if we all lived in one city. Let's say we all lived in Seattle. Well, you have certain things that are crazy going on within certain cities, that everybody would be exposed to, and sin would just grow and grow. I mean, just thinking about certain cities, certain cities may have prostitution that is, going on just right down the street, and you see it, and I know that has to do with Seattle. There's certain parts of Seattle where you can literally see, not even in a hidden way, prostitution going on. In other areas of the city, you have robberies. You have people carjacking other people. You have maybe in a city like Oakland, California, I think they have looting that's going on a lot. And different crimes that are happening, just on, a bigger scale than what is normal in certain parts of history. And so if we were all in one city, I think sin would just really increase, to a higher level. And I think because we are, as people, are spread across the whole entire world, I think that, sin doesn't spread as easily. And, now there are different people, across different, languages that, have their own clique and have their own families. And, they don't necessarily know and understand what others across the world have to say and how they live their life. And so one of the things that I notice about artificial intelligence is that it seems to me that for the literal sense of Genesis, they are making advancements as far as the language barrier being broken. I think read an article. I don't know if I even read the full article, but I read one of the headlines at least. And I think when I actually looked into it a little bit, there was, and we've already seen this already, of basically an artificial intelligent app or device that can, in no time translate between different languages. And I think even I saw a wearable device now. One of the most recent things I saw was just a little device that you can just attach onto your clothes. And as a person who maybe is speaking Spanish to you and you don't speak Spanish, but that person is speaking Spanish, and the device picks it up, and it translates to you in your language, so in English. And so I think little by little, that's one of the things that I think clearly in Genesis it had some merit towards God coming down to the earth. And so it seems to be, even without going into some of the deeper levels of what we can kind of gather, as far as, maybe not too deep, but, certain levels that we can gather from the story of the Tower of Babel, of maybe they were building the city high in order to be like God and different things like that. I think one of the basic things that we can kind of gather is that, there was unity, and that language barrier is what God used to break up some of that unity and preventing them from accomplishing everything that they can think of, and that's one of the things that God wanted to at least slow down or prevent, is people being able to create anything that they can think of. Now I think we see this more and more today, of how there are different inventions that are being created, especially, in the last, maybe 200 years, 300 years or so, of, different things that are really advancing society. And so one of the things that I think is bad about breaking the language barrier, especially as artificial intelligence unites the world, well, think about it from, a whole bunch of different levels, but also, from the standpoint of, when you have a God rejecting world and now they are unified and working together, and now it's like there's not necessarily an ocean between these people, because now we have cars and planes, and there's different things that are now bringing the world closer together, and of course breaking that language barrier. I think it invites, one, yes, an advancement in technology because you have different brains working together, but also I think an increase in sin, which brings us closer to the wrath of God being poured out, because obviously God only lets sin increase to a certain level that he holds, that he knows, and then he acts on it. And so obviously I hold the position of how God is acting on sin every single day, of course, but I think as a collective, people group and world, I think there's a certain level that God allows to, take place and let it build up until, he acts, collectively on the world. And so, I just thought, the Tower of Babel would be a good kind of lesson in that, one, I don't think there are some inventions that, I think the people that are inventing it are so caught up in a godless mentality that they don't even think about there being a God existing who would stop them from doing what they want to do. And so that's one thing that I get from the Genesis account, is that, God does care about what we do. And so I think some things, in a way, sort of have to get approved by God. Obviously, we don't know how that would even happen, but, I think some things, are approved by God, and then other things are rejected. And, when you talk about some of the things that is happening in artificial intelligence, like they are building robots, they are building computers. Basically, I call it either the brain or the actual body. And, they are working to do this. And, I like what another person, a minister, said, is that, they are really trying to figure out eternal life. And, of course, they're trying to figure out even more things, beyond that, too. There are some things that, certain companies are doing that, I've heard talks of how eventually they are trying to either merge our body with artificial intelligence, with the brain part of technology and computers, and also the body parts of, robots. And they're trying to bring those things into one, so, human beings can be more than what we are today. And so I think that, those type of things have to be, I highly doubt that it isn't. They have to be something that God would not allow. I'm sure, God is, relatively supportive of people inventing, different things to, help us out, like healing. If someone doesn't have an arm, maybe a robot arm, would be helpful, right? Or, if someone, doesn't have, working legs, maybe, if they had like an artificial spine or something, that would be helpful. That helps them walk again or feel and different things like that. I don't think God is necessarily against something on that level. Obviously, I can't, speak for God, but one thing I do want to say is that I think, again, going back to, artificial intelligence seems to be almost at enmity with God, where they are working to do something that, God is already offering us, and when we come to faith in Jesus Christ. But it's like, some of the inventions are kind of, fighting against God, in my opinion. And, basically they are trying to, basically say, hey, God, we don't need you. We're going to, do these things on our own. There are different technologies out there that they are trying to develop. It's funny that, a lot of the things that we see in maybe a sci-fi movie, or, something that comes from our imagination and it maybe comes into a book or a movie, people actually sort of gravitate towards trying to actually do some of these things. And so, I've seen a video on terraforming the moon, or terraforming Mars, which is basically, terraforming is like, making it so Mars is livable and a paradise, and has water, and basically using technology here on Earth to basically make another Earth. And so I go back to people are trying to be like God, but not necessarily being like God in a goodness way, or something like that. They are trying to reign like God and take God off of the throne and say, I want to be on the throne. And I think that's a little bit about what's behind some of these inventions, even though obviously it doesn't come off that way. But there are certain technologies where now they have an implant that you can get implanted in your brain, and you can be able to communicate with your phone or with different technology just by your thoughts. And this is something that they're actually working on, and they've actually already implanted something into someone's brain. And so when you go to the Tower of Babel story, it seems to me that we're getting to that point where there has to be some sort of major change that happens from God, answering back to what people do. Because if you go to that Tower of Babel story, God clearly, intervened when the time came to do so. And so I want to go to Revelation chapter 13. And this is, just an interesting, Bible verse story here that, I think, we don't know exactly how all of these things take place. But, obviously, as time goes on, some of these things become more clear. But I think I should probably just read all of Revelation chapter 13. And so starting at verse 1, it says, "Then I saw a beast rising up out of the sea. It had 7 heads and 10 horns, with 10 crowns on its horns, and written on each head were names that blaspheme God. This beast looked like a leopard, but it had the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave the beast his own power and throne and great authority. I saw that one of the heads of the beast seemed wounded beyond recovery, but the fatal wound was healed. The whole world marveled at this miracle and gave allegiance to the beast." So there you go. That's one of the main reasons why, going back to that unity that we saw in Genesis, well, it seems to repeat during the time of the tribulation and during time of Revelation. And one of the things that unifies the people is this wound that is healed miraculously, basically. And I'm not sure if there is an involvement of technology, or this is, some supernatural power that's obviously, not from God, which is a whole nother, kind of discussion where we kind of wonder, how does, someone who doesn't like God, or someone who hates God, have the ability to use power, that we would probably attribute coming from God. But anyway, one of the things that unifies the people is seeing this wound healed, and they pledge their allegiance to the beast. And so they worship the dragon for giving the beast such power, and they also worship the beast. Who is as great as the beast, they exclaimed. Who is able to fight against him? Then the beast was allowed to speak great blasphemies against God. He was given authority to do whatever he wanted for 42 months, and he spoke terrible words of blasphemy against God, slandering his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And the beast was allowed to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And he was given authority to rule over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all the people who belong to this world worship the beast. So, is it possible that this beast, could be maybe a robot with artificial intelligence, and, God is calling it a beast or something? Or maybe it is, representative of the Antichrist, like most scholars say. But, is technology involved in this? We don't know. God knows. But anyway, and he was given I'm going to read from verse 7, kind of towards the middle of verse 7. And he was given authority to rule over every tribe and people and language and nation. Verse 8. And all the people who belong to this world worship the beast. They are the ones whose names were not written in the book of life that belongs to the Lamb who was slaughtered before the world was made. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand. Anyone who is destined for prison will be taken to prison. Anyone destined to die will die by the sword. This means that God's holy people must endure persecution patiently and remain faithful. Then I saw another beast come up out of the earth. He had 2 horns like those of a lamb, but he spoke with the voice of a dragon. He exercised all the authority of the first beast, and he required all the earth and its people to worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. He did as astounding miracles, even making fire flash down to earth from the sky while everyone was watching. And with all the miracles he was allowed to perform on behalf of the first beast, he deceived all the people who belonged to this world. He ordered the people to make a great statue of the first beast, who was fatally wounded and then came back to life. He was then permitted to give life to this statue so that it could speak. Then the statue of the beast commanded that anyone refusing to worship it must die. So, clearly, is this maybe artificial intelligence is leading to this image, that the image of the beast, which it's a statue that is being brought to life. And so, I just think, this is kind of an indication of when the whole world basically loses their mind, as far as, sometimes, obviously, when the Bible describes godless people, it describes them in such a way of having a depraved mind. But, from my observations, it sometimes seems as if people have some sort of level of, maybe, I don't know, decency or, logic in some way of, like, oh, it's warm because the sun is out, or it's cold because, we're further away from the sun at this point or something. And so people can kind of have, kind of these rational type of thoughts sometimes. Obviously, from the standpoint of the Bible, people in general without God are not necessarily, wise or, very logical. But, at least, you can kind of tell that people sometimes, have some sort of normalcy to them. But, when you read this part in the Bible and Revelation chapter 13, it seems like all of that is gone. People start to really lose their mind and, start to go after this beast, after this image. And, first it says that they go after the first beast, but then a second beast comes up and makes this image, and it basically goes to a whole different level when it's already even at a crazier level. And so I'm saying all this to say that, is it possible that artificial intelligence has something to do with this? I think so, and it's interesting that, the Bible uses the word beast, and, when it's saying that it's causing the world to, worship the beast, like it says it's like forcing them to, basically. So does that have something to do with, maybe an implant in people's brains or something? That sounds a little bit crazy, but, when I actually say it, but is there something involved with, technology at this point in scripture? I don't know. When you think about people, of different religions that exist right now, but yet they're giving up their religious beliefs, for this image of the beast, because it says that they start to worship it, and so it's like, it's no longer like, oh, I'm a Buddhist, or, I'm, maybe a Muslim, or I always get Muslim and Islam mixed up, but, I'm something like that, or, I believe in this over here, or even atheists, where are the atheists in this time of the world here, where it's like, even the people who are like, oh, I don't believe in God or anything like that. Well, it's saying that, all those people give up their religion that they worship, and they start worshiping this beast. And so, it's, it seems to be a pretty crazy time, in the world. But I love how the Bible sort of gives some hints of how, there are the saints who aren't necessarily fooled by this stuff, and, one thing in conclusion, this is kind of a longer video, but, I don't think God is necessarily against, like I was saying in the beginning, new technologies and stuff. When you think about, maybe a spaceship where you can, travel to the moon or something, those don't necessarily seem like something that God would necessarily be against, but obviously, I am just giving my opinion on that. But, I think, the problem comes when, one, you are rejecting God and you're doing things on your own. That's a big problem in of itself. But two, they start to worship this image. It's no longer like, we're doing these things against God. Now it's like, hey, this is our God. Now we believe basically in something else that is not God, the true God, and so it's like they take up this anti-belief system, which is even worse than unbelief, I think. It's like, it's no longer just, hey, I'm living life and I don't know if there's a God or not, or I don't, care enough. And so they move on to, a completely different mindset. And so, Could it be possible that, maybe there is some, technology or people are, sort of merged with, artificial intelligence through some new tech that is invented? Clearly they are sort of thinking along this line. When I saw that, a very prominent inventor or tech person actually has already started trials of implanting this device into a person's brain in order to, have them try to control technology. And then you hear other, at least rumors of how, they're trying to basically make people smarter and, advance society. Is it possible that, there is some sort of, mind control type of thing going on? Or, it's just basically from people's sort of free will and also just being fooled and deceived into doing some of this crazy stuff. So anyway, this is just what I wanted to kind of go over as far as, some of my thoughts on artificial intelligence. Obviously, sometimes it's great to have the convenience of, a smartphone where you can, Google maybe a fun fact, or maybe something like, hey, what are these directions to, a certain place or something like that. Obviously, a phone is great to, connect with, someone across the way, a family member, and I think there are things that are good about technology, but, when you think about some of the things that people have invented, like a bomb, which doesn't necessarily have, you can't really make a long list of some of the pros of why someone would invent it other than for the purpose of war. There's not really any other beneficial, invention purpose for something like a bomb. Or, when you think about, something else, and I just use that as an example to say that, clearly people, do use technology and, different things for good. But, it seems like every technology, probably has some sort of evil side to it. And, the scale is probably, a little more on some things than the others. A phone may not be as, evil as maybe, or a phone may be more evil than maybe an invention of an electronic fan, or, different things like that, where, a phone or tablet or something has more potential for, connecting you to sin. And so, anyway, I think that for us that are Christians, I think that, we know the Word of God. I think one of the reasons why we believe is for the goodness of God. It's not just, for the benefits of being alive and, having certain abilities that we have as human beings. But I think, one of the reasons why we follow Jesus, is, even Jesus himself said, that we should listen to his teaching, and we can, believe in him from his teachings. And so I think that's one of the reasons why, we follow God, is not necessarily, for the sole purpose of eternal life. I think obviously that's probably one of the big reasons, but, God is, a God of holiness and a God of goodness, and he wants to help us get to that level of, righteousness and holiness and, following after what is good. And, I can imagine that maybe in the new heavens and the new earth, there will be some form of technology, possibly, I don't know, but, there will be some sort of, supernatural power that God, I know maybe some people don't use the word supernatural, but I'm sure God in the future is going to do things, use his power in some way, and so I don't think God is against, different things like what we see in some technologies. But, I think going back to, how people are rejecting, the righteousness of God, the holiness of God, and following Jesus and accepting his sacrifice on the cross, which, God had already planned before he even created the world. It says that Jesus died on the cross before, we even got here. And so, you don't really have any other option, especially because, it was planned, way long before we even got to, 2024 when I'm recording this video. And so, we have the appointment of accepting Christ and, receiving, the work that he did for us, and not rejecting God who brought all these things into existence, and, not rejecting the one who created us. And so, obviously, people are going to make their own choices, but, I think for us as Christians who are watching this, I think that, we have a lot of good things to look forward to, and I don't think that we have to be afraid of, the future. I think obviously some of these things are concerning, but, this is, Revelation chapter 13, even though it sounds crazy, it's actually has already happened, before, as far as, if you look at the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, he made a statue that everyone had to worship. And so, I think, in the future, it would be a different spin on it, because apparently this statue can, talk and stuff. But, I think that, that can be somewhat comforting, knowing that, Revelation chapter 13, even though it's kind of a disturbing chapter, when you look at, Daniel, you see, wow, this sort of thing has happened before. And Daniel made it through, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego made it through. And then we look at the Tower of Babel, and then I love how God puts in the story of Noah, the story of Lot. And I think there is an escape from all these things. I think this is one of the main reasons why Jesus told us to pray to be counted worthy to escape all that will happen and stand before the Son of Man. And I think, that is just another motivation to, try our best, and try using, God's best, God's power to overcome, right now in the here and now. And, I think God gives us the story of Noah and the story of Lot for a reason. And, Peter brings it up in his book about how God knows how to rescue the godly out of, various temptations and trials. And so I do believe that, we have the rapture to look forward to. I think, maybe one day I'll go back over Matthew 25, which is a great chapter on the 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish virgins, where 5 went into the wedding. The foolish ones were left behind. Jesus himself talked about some being taken and another left. And so I think there's definitely, some biblical evidence for the rapture. And obviously, in Revelation 13, even God himself wants us to know that we have to be patient. It says that, we have to be patient and remain faithful. And so, I think, just like Jesus, when he looked past, the cross to heaven, I think that, I don't think we as a collective body of Christ will necessarily see some of these things. obviously it's, stating some of these statements because there will be, some Christians that are here. But, I do think there's biblical evidence for a rapture and some type of escape before, a lot of these major cataclysmic events happen. And so I think, check out maybe Perry Stone. He has some pretty good videos on the rapture. Some of them are for purchase, but he does have actually a lot of free material too. And I think that he gives some good advice on, the rapture. I think some ministries like Seventh-day Adventist, even though I like some of the things that they put out, and not to bash on Seventh-day Adventists, but I think they sometimes don't necessarily hold a correct view in regards to Revelation and the future. And so anyway, I think I just bring that up to say, there are some teachings that I think can be a little bit, hurtful to you, especially when talking about some of these stressful things that I think can bring anxiety on us. That, I don't think it's anxiety enough to say that, oh, we shouldn't talk about these things, or pastors shouldn't preach about these things in church, because no, I think that, God wants us to know these things. And, I think, it's important to know that, I believe that we can escape, a lot of these things. And so, anyway, hopefully you found this helpful. You can check out, for those that made it this far. Sorry it was a super long video. For those that didn't, you probably would have watched it the whole thing if it was a little bit shorter. But anyway, you can check out my rapture on video on Revelation chapter 7. It's actually just audio, and I kind of go into detail a little bit more about how I think there is an escape from the Great Tribulation. And so anyway, I think that was posted about a week ago or so it shouldn't be too far down in my videos list on my channel. And so thanks so much for checking this out. Hopefully this was helpful to someone, and I will talk to you on the next one. See ya.